Welcome to another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It.
Well, hi there. It's Matthew Blade, speaker, leadership coach, and former broadcaster. And this is the podcast that's all about when life becomes the teacher. Every day we sit down with people who didn't just study it, read it, or preach it. They absolutely lived it. And our guest today is one who has been living it for 30 plus years. And today we're going to talk about the two systems that sort of make our world go. And so, Dave, I was on your Substack earlier today and I saw the new post, Thinking Fast and Slow. And I was like, this is going to be a juicy topic today. So what do you mean by like thinking fast and slow? What is this all about today?
Yeah. So this is based on a book by Daniel Kahneman. The book came out in 2011. It was pretty groundbreaking when it first hit the scene. Typically, we would think about decision making as, oh, I just thought it through and decided that this is what I was going to do, and then I followed through and did it. What this book highlighted was that there are actually two separate systems in the brain for processing information. One Dr. Kahneman called System 1 and the other he called System 2. System 1 is what we talked about last week of the autopilot, that there are things that happen that we just do automatically. The brain is scanning the environment for cues on different situations and then quickly makes an assessment and processes it in milliseconds. The longest process in the brain would be something to come to conscious thought, or maybe a facial recognition, and the longest process in that automatic process takes half a second. Everything else is faster than that. So this is all behind the scenes, and usually we end up telling ourselves, oh, I thought it through and I made a decision about it, but really that's our System 2 kind of making up a story to describe what just happened in System 1.
Interesting. So, last week we talked a lot about how, we make decisions, and I got a lot of really good feedback on that segment that we did about your picker and just kind of getting your picker right if you're finding that you keep falling into the same relationships. And so I guess, what floats through my mind as soon as you say that, Dr. Dave, is, okay, if at best I have a half a millisecond, is that what you said?
Half a second. So 500 milliseconds.
So if at best I have a half a second to like hit the pause button and go, hold on, that's not what I want to do. I want to try to do something different. I think the question that I'm trying to come up with is, how do I interrupt the pattern to start thinking differently?
Yeah. Isn't that a complex dilemma that we all have to deal with, right?
Yeah. Well, and what I love about it is it validates all of us on why it's so hard to start to make different choices and new decisions. It's because of what you just talked about. Most of it's on autopilot and it's happening so fast, we don't have control over it. So yeah, jump into that.
So System 1 works really well for most of the mundane things that you do. You don't want to spend hours trying to pick out what color shirt you're going to wear and whether it matches your pants or not, and what socks you're going to pick to go with it. You want to be able to make those kinds of decisions very quickly. And a lot of these systems in the brain came up before we had a really complex society. So some of these things are based on survival instincts. They have to happen very quickly, because if you are out in the wild and you're about to be attacked by a lion, it's really good to be able to recognize it in milliseconds and be able to come up with a course of action without having to consciously think about it. So a lot of these systems are designed for survival and are really, really old in our history as humans. And they get programmed from a very young age. So the things that we recognize, the things that are automatic, get programmed when we're children, and sometimes we're able to remodel them accidentally, through corrective experiences or through, learning in school or through friendships and supportive relationships. But sometimes they are miscalibrated. And when they're miscalibrated, they get us into trouble. And so this is where System 2 comes in. So system one is the automatic system. You make a snap decision. System two comes in naturally when there's something that requires you to pause and slow down. So maybe system two might come in when just something doesn't feel right about the situation, and there's something, a gut feeling that tells you you ought to take a look at this before you just jump into it. Or sometimes system two will come in when there's something inherently dangerous or risky. You're about to invest $100,000 in this stock that you're not really sure if it's going to, make money, or if you could potentially lose your entire savings on it. Right. So those are situations where you don't want to make a snap decision. You want to pause, look at it, weigh all the consequences, imagine into the future what the worst case scenario might be, look at whether there's any inherent immediate risk to it. And also social factors come in, whether there might be some social blowback if you make a certain choice, or not. So system two is the slow and deliberate process, and system one is the fast, thoughtless, automatic process.
Okay, so if you've just joined us, what we're doing is we're talking to Dr. Dave today. We're just getting some clarity, and look, every Wednesday is going to be like this. What Dave is here to do is to help us understand how the mind works. Thus, the reason that we call the thing that we do here, Dr. Dave's Mind Works, right? How does this work? And today we're discussing this book, Thinking Fast and Slow, that came out about a decade ago, that, according to Dr. Dave, was very groundbreaking. And so for those of you who have just joined us, what we're doing is talking about how the mind works as it relates to making these decisions and recognizing patterns, so that we might be able to interrupt those patterns to make different choices.
Right.
You mentioned in your Substack article that there's kind of 4 areas of system one. Is this an appropriate time to discuss one of those
Yeah.
things?
So the 4 big domains where system one is active is in pattern recognition. So you can think of pattern recognition as your brain asking the question, have I seen something like this before? Is this something that looks familiar to me? The next area is heuristics, which
What's that?
it can be summed up as rules of thumb. So it's kind of like generalizations, or prejudices, or things that you see that are patterns where good enough is good enough in that situation. You don't
Okay.
overthink it. It's just kind of a rule of thumb for making a decision. Unfortunately, those can be biased depending on how you develop them. So
And probably
again,
how you were raised too, right?
how you were raised, early experiences that you have. So those are good to revisit, and make sure that they're still accurate. The next area is emotional tagging. So we talked about this last week, where this is the process where your brain decides, is this safe or unsafe? Is this going to be time consuming, or can I do this quickly? Is this something that I'm going to enjoy, or something that I'm going to dread? So kind of developing the valence of the situation, just a gut feeling, is this something that I'm attracted to, or something that I need to push away? And a lot of that is based on, how did I feel the last time I experienced this? So the brain kind of takes the previous experiences and then projects it into the current circumstance automatically. And then the fourth area is learned associations. When I experience A, B usually follows. And again, this may be true for a lot of things, but depending on how you grew up, there may be some situations where B doesn't necessarily follow A. So these are the big areas where system one is engaged. And what we want to do, so system one works well for the mundane. System two works well for the known threats, or the known crises that are coming up. But then there's this whole murky middle ground. And this is where people oftentimes will have miscalibrations in their system one. And what you want to do going forward is, if you find yourself in patterns, and this is, where we talked about the bad picker, if you find yourself in patterns where what you're doing automatically is not getting you where you need to be, develop the ability to see that pattern unfolding, and instead of immediately reacting to it, press the pause button, pull it into system 2, and then take a little time to think through what you're doing, take a look at the situation, ask questions.
I have a question I want to ask you right now.
Yeah.
The woo woo in me wants to say, could I call on these systems? Could I be there in the midst of needing to make a decision, and could I kind of say, to myself, however I want to articulate this, like,
Mhm.
hey, system 2, I need you right now. System 1, you're on pause. System 2, I need you right now. And do you think that the brain would do something where it might, kind of get us into system 2 and kind of tell system 1, we don't need you right now? Or is that really not how it works?
I think you can use that as a tool to get into
Okay.
system 2 thinking. The problem with system 2 and why we don't use it all the time is it's expensive, right? You're taking up time deliberately thinking through details of something, or maybe even having to research details on something, where with system 1, you make a snap decision, it's done, and you move on, right? So there's a churning component to system 2. It also taxes your brain. When your brain is actively processing, you use a lot of glucose, and it can wear you down and lead to mental fatigue. So your brain is set up in a way that it tries to push off as much as possible into system 1, and only use system 2 for the real urgent situations, right? So knowing that that's how the brain is oriented and biased towards system 1, the situations that would get you into trouble are the ones that you deliberately want to press the pause button and pull system 2 in, because you want to get that deliberative process to try to get a different outcome. Now, the good thing is, if you do this with regularity, and let's say there's just, for argument's sake, one particular thing that you don't like about yourself, about the way that you're handling a situation, and you know that it's a problem and it's come up before, and you really, really want to change it. If you get good at catching it, and then you think through your response to the situation and try a different approach, and you get feedback on how that worked out. And that feedback could come just naturally, or you could involve a therapist or a good friend to give you some feedback on it. As that becomes practiced, your brain will upload that into system 1, and it's like a firmware update. Now system 1 is recalibrated and more accurate to the situation, so that you can fall back on system 1 in those situations and not fall into the same patterns that get you into trouble.
I want to ask you for a real world example of this, and how I might apply this today. But let me just say, for the folks that have just joined us, we're on with Dr. Dave. He's a psychiatrist, and he's been the psychiatrist on Learn from People Who Lived It for the last few years. And the reason he's here is because he has such a great way to explain these really complex situations. And today we're talking about thinking fast and thinking slow, all based on this book that came out about a decade ago called Thinking Fast and Slow. So, okay, you've given us an education about system 1. We know what system 2 is. We know that there's 4 components to system 1: pattern recognition, rules of thumb, emotional tagging, learned associations. How could one of our viewers today or listeners today apply this into their life? What is the real world application of understanding system 1 and 2?
Right. Well, I can give you the example that I used in the article, because that one comes to mind right away. The idea that if you have kind of an automatic thought that silence equals danger. And so what I mean by that is, maybe you grew up in a chaotic household, and when a person in authority, like your mom or your dad, goes silent, then that means anger is going to come soon, or punishment is going to come soon to follow. And so, having grown up in that environment where when things go quiet, the shit's going to hit the fan, right? Now you're an adult, and you're at work, and you're having a conversation with a coworker, and you get this thought in your head: I don't think that this person really likes me, and there's a pause in the conversation, and your impulse is to immediately, like, fill in that pause, because that silence makes you feel anxious or uncomfortable. Right? It has nothing to do with the person in front of you, right? That person may be fine. they enjoy you as a coworker. They have no ill feelings toward you. And this is just something that's popping up from an old pattern. So this involves emotional tagging, right? So the experience has a fear and negative valence to it. So when the situation comes up in real time, a negative feeling comes inside of you, and you feel anxious and uncomfortable with it. And so it ends up driving behavior, people pleasing behavior, and fear of authority. So what you have to do is recognize that this is what's happening, and then start questioning it. Question it in the immediate circumstances. So let's say you had an awkward conversation with your coworker, and you caught yourself feeling uncomfortable every time there was a pause. Ask yourself, what evidence do I have that this person doesn't like me? Right? I don't. They're fine. They're fine. They're not, we always get along great. And when we have a project to do together, we work collaboratively. I don't otherwise get a negative vibe from this person. So why am I reacting this way? Or in the situations of authority, especially if you can tie it back to childhood and say, when I have to go in to talk with my boss, I feel like I'm standing in front of my dad, and he's going to dress me down for something that I did that was stupid. Right. And so when you start to recognize that pattern, you can pregame it in your mind ahead of time and say, that's not my dad. That person is not there to be threatening to me. Again, assuming that that's correct. Right. So you have to put your detective hat on and look at it. I mean, sometimes you can have a boss that is an authoritarian and is difficult to please and get along with, but that's them. That's not you. Right. And it's important to make that distinction.
Yeah, what's coming through to me right now is kind of my real world example, and I'm hoping everybody that's watching us is kind of putting themselves into these scenarios and going, where does this show up for me? But I had an old story in my head that I don't know enough and I'm not smart enough, right? And that story can still show up for me, and does about probably every week. There's some small thing that shows up in my life where I don't know enough and I'm not smart enough. And I have to really challenge that thought, because I have to keep saying to myself, that isn't even true. Yes, you know, and I know where it stems from, right? It stems from an interaction that I had with my father back when I was 23, where, well, you all know the story by now, where he has a heart attack in front of me and I tried to save his life and I can't. And so in that moment, this belief system gets put up in me that I don't know enough and I'm not smart enough, because I couldn't do it. And it's completely irrational. It's unfair. There's not a cardiologist in the world that could have saved my dad. But nonetheless, that belief system is set up within me. And I still, to this day, have to kind of fight that sometimes. And it doesn't show up in situations that are like life and death like that. It could show up in a situation where, like, I have to do my taxes at the end of the year. And I'm like, I am not smart enough. I don't know enough. I don't even know how to do this. And I'm really trying to work hard on challenging myself to say, well, but could you learn it? Could you figure it out with the help of somebody else? Could you figure it out? So in a sense, am I using these systems the way that you're explaining it?
Yeah. The reality is none of us know everything. Right. So if you put somebody in enough situations, you're going to have them in a situation where they don't know enough, where they're not competent to handle that situation. So that's just true for everybody. The reality is you're good enough at most things to be, a good dad, to be able to run a podcast correctly, right? So you know enough to do enough of the right things, and the things that you don't know, you can learn or farm it out to somebody else. But it's in no way a negative reflection on who you are at your core, right? And so that's the thing that is important for people to take away from it, is that these miscalibrations are not a judgment against you as a person. They're just areas where there's more work to be done, or areas where you need to align your belief with what's actually happening, accepting your limitations in an honest and realistic way without negative judgment, and looking for areas where you can improve with it. The problem is when shame gets mixed in with it. Shame shuts you down. So if you're ashamed of who you are, you're not going to engage with it. You're not going to get better at it. You're going to withdraw and pull away. And so it ends up having the opposite effect of what you want. You want to build competence, you want to get better at doing things, and you want to be more proficient at it. And shame will do the opposite. It'll shut you down, and you'll withdraw from things.
We could probably spend an entire couple of episodes on shame, and we probably should at some point. All right, as we wind down, any marching orders for anybody that's watching us right now or listening to the podcast? Is there one thing that they could do today that would just improve their life 1%?
Take a look at the patterns in your life. Take a look at the things that you'd like to see improve, and read my Substack about engaging system 2. There's some practical tips on there on how to do it, and make it a practice. Getting better at changing the software that we grew up with and updating it with more accurate patterns and more accurate systems for being able to identify things. The more that improves and becomes more accurate, you're on the road to wisdom and having more balance in your life.
Love it. Well, thank you very much. And just a reminder, everybody, you can get over to Dave's Substack. We've got a link to it, excuse me, in our show notes. The other thing that I just thought I would let you know really quick is up in that top left, there's a QR code, which will take you to Amazon, where you can pick up your copy of our Revive and Thrive 6-week wellness course. Dave and I wrote this together. And I always say to people, if you're stuck or if you're just looking for, like, you know, I love the way you say it. Like, you go to the gym, you work out. This book will kind of give you that mental and emotional and spiritual kind of workout to get you unstuck. And I think the coolest thing about it is that it mirrors my healing journey, but it also mirrors your clinical experience.
Right.
And so I just want to make sure everybody knows that that's available. The course is video led. So every page has a QR code where you can watch, and we walk people through the 6 elements: get moving, managing expectations, having hard conversations, forgiveness, trying something new. It's a great read, and it's light-esque.
Yeah,
and in terms
some
of
pretty tough topics, but
Sure.
we try to do it in a lighthearted way and keep people engaged with it. We don't want it to become overwhelming, but we want to challenge you and make you flex those emotional muscles.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the perfect companion piece to anybody who's actually in therapy right now, or working on themselves, or doing some personal development, or just looking to take themselves from, and turn up the volume on their life a little bit. It's a great book. Well, thanks again, Dr. Dave. Just a reminder that tomorrow we're going to be back with our good friend, Jill McMahon, for her segment, which is called Guns and Grief. And I haven't mentioned this so far this week, but tomorrow on the podcast, we're going to be talking about a real life example that I experienced over the weekend. I witnessed a tragic event over the weekend, and I'm going to talk to Jill about that event because I know that it's going to be relatable for other people who might have seen something similar. So I hope that you guys can stop back tomorrow and join us at 12:30 here on our channel. Dave, have a great rest of your afternoon. We'll see you next week, pal.
All right, take care.
All right, guys. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow.